Michelle Obama will be inducted into the National Women's Hall of Fame. Not to be outdone, Melania Trump is set to be inducted into the National Hall of Frowns.
Los Angeles area vaccination clinic for senior citizens and other essential workers was shut down after hundreds of people who were not eligible signed up. Why do I have a feeling that Lori Loughlin and Felicity Huffman are behind this?
Thousands of motorcyclists are in Daytona Beach, Florida this week for Bike Week, but they say all brawls will be at a reduced capacity.
An Italian restaurant in Tunisia offers a $360 pizza covered with 24-karat gold flakes, topped with truffle cream and smoked duck breast. And if it's not delivered in 30 minutes or less, you get a free order of cheesy snails.
And finally, the CDC says fully vaccinated people can now gather indoors without masks. Read between the lines, people. The CDC has just condoned swingers parties. Welcome to the swinginest party you can find on Facebook at 11 a.m. Pacific time, 2 p.m. Eastern. Yes, indeed. We're back for another Biden time. I am Christian Bladt, bringing the funny, really just stealing the funny from Tamra Brown.
Hey there.
And stealing the soul of Scott Moore, who is joining us from a remote location, probably for the last time. Hopefully we'll be all set, trying to get things on a normal schedule come April. We'll talk about that a little bit later. We'll have it all sorted out. But we're so glad to have everybody. There are more significant things to talk about. But one of the things that I feel like, when you can highlight people you don't agree with, making a point that you feel like, yeah, they've got something here. I wanted to talk about the fact that we're 50 days in, which is crazy because it really feels like Biden being president is something that only like just happened. Mm-hmm. But 50 days in, and he has still not done a solo press conference. And that's very much out of the ordinary. And anybody who's watched when he does interact with the press isn't really shocked to hear it. But I think, I don't know. I mean, I think that, you have people you can refer to while you're up there. I guess you could give him a secret earpiece, cue cards. But I don't know that I can't say it bothers me, but it's sort of like annoying because people make the point and you're like, well, yeah, shouldn't he do that? Shouldn't he take questions from the press? So I wanted to start with that today and see what you think, Tamra. Is it time for Joe Biden to take a question from somebody?
Well, we are back to having a press secretary who's doing daily briefings, which we weren't getting that as much in the previous administration. But so Biden hasn't been making public speeches as much as previous presidents. Is that what's happening?
Well, yeah, but he just hasn't done a press conference yet. And I think that what I was reading is that George W. Bush, it took 34 days for him, whereas Bill Clinton, it took 9 days. And President Trump, it was, I think, 3 weeks. So it's out of the ordinary that he hasn't done it even once yet, compared to not just President Trump, compared to other ones. And I think that it lends itself to the narrative that Mark Meadows and Jim Jordan, who will, talk about anything except for allegations in the wrestling program he was involved in. This is the last thing he'll ever talk about, but he'll talk about this. So they're making the point that clearly he's in decline. And putting him out there. And
they'll make that point no matter what. I mean, that's the narrative they want to push no matter what. I wasn't aware that he wasn't making. So and I assume, I guarantee that most 99% of Americans have not noticed. Why have we not heard from our president? We're not all gathered around the radio to listen to Cronkite in the evening times. So I think it's fine. I think that I would like to believe that he's got better things to do. He's actually working on stuff. So maybe, it doesn't bother me. And we're looking forward to hearing what he has to say Thursday night based on whether something is or is not getting passed right now as we speak.
Right, which we'll talk about that as sort of the big looming topic. Maybe they've got him doing weekly fireside chats like FDR did. They're just, putting a microphone in front of him and it's not connected to anything. They're just like, yeah, why don't you talk to the country, Uncle Joe? It's fine. Oh, that was another good home run. Everybody loved it. He's like, yeah, but what about the TikToks? Oh my God, the TikToks love it. What do you think about this, Scott? I mean, it's a little bit abnormal. They were saying this a month ago. I was just like, yeah, okay, whatever. There's a lot of cleanup duty. This is like cleaning up the White House at this point is definitely, like it's like Ash Wednesday in the French Quarter in New Orleans. There's a lot that you have to be done. That's really a full-time job. So, but we're getting to a point where it's like, yeah, and there it doesn't help when you have the video where he says, "Oh, you want me to take some questions?" And immediately they cut the feed. He was like willing to do it, and they're like, "Nope." So I don't know. Tell me what you think.
I mean, look, until you said it too, to Tamra's point, I had no idea either that it had been that long. And yes, I get it. Like,
okay, again, so do you guys need my login for Newsmax and the Blaze? Is that really what you're telling me? You want to share passwords? That's cool. We can do that.
Yes, I appreciate it. Yes. But look, I mean, yes, it does help the other side to bring this whole thing that he's not capable of answering questions without going off script, which we all know that he's been known for that for years and years and years. But, to Tamra's point, they're going to continuously do that if he did it every single day or not, because then they'll jump on whatever comment he said or an extra long stutter or whatever it takes. Yes, it's a little odd, but, he is speaking on Thursday night. And I do think the same thing. He's been working and trying to get a lot of these things passed with executive orders. And now this, $1.9 trillion deal that had to go back to the House and get that done. And the things that he said he was going to do for the American people. And I think now that he's gotten through this first hurdle, that perhaps he will come out and do some questions. And again, like Tamra said, like the press secretary is out every single day doing daily briefings, and that's her job. And I think we've just gotten used to the fact that a president wants to come out and talk about himself, but that's not Joe Biden's MO. It never really has been to that degree. He's never been that type of politician. He's more of the, just kind of get to work kind of politician. So I think for him, this is not out of the ordinary. But yeah, it would be nice just to have a Q&A with the press, just to have that and have that interaction will be good. And I'm sure they will do it sooner than later. They just want to get through these hurdles of getting this important legislation passed first.
And look, Tamra, we've sort of mentioned her indirectly a couple of times, but we know that you were doing impressions of Sarah Huckabee Sanders, and you kind of skipped Kayleigh McEnany. Do you have a Jen Psaki? And I know that's not. I did
a Kayleigh McEnany like once or twice, but with both McEnany and Jen Psaki, they both just don't have like a definitive enough.
Yeah,
I when I always describe impressions, it's like I could nail a Jen Psaki impression and nobody would be like, "Oh God," people would be like, "You could nail it," or you could completely flub it and nobody would be any the wiser.
Right, nobody would know who it was.
Yeah, exactly. you could do it very inconsistently. Do it, one video completely different than the next, and people wouldn't know.
People I mean, look, when you have
Jen Psaki, when you have a larger than life character like Sarah Huckabee Sanders, it's really hard to follow that up. I mean, it's not like there were a lot of great impressions of past press secretaries. It's not like somebody had a good Robert Gibbs. There's not a ton of great ones out there. Although Sean Spicer, let's be honest.
I mean,
Melissa McCarthy had a pretty solid one.
That was
anyway. I started with that because I wanted to buy us some time, and I didn't know it was going to only take about 5 minutes into the show. But apparently, the House has passed the $1.9 trillion stimulus plan, and the final tally is a resounding margin for the Democrats, 220 to 211. So they won by 9 votes. And but I mean, look, this was the last hurdle. I do love this thing where it's like the House votes on it and then the Senate votes on it, and then they're like, yeah, but let's check your math, and let's just make sure we're ready to turn this in. It's sort of like the one person who finishes the whole project while everybody goes off on spring break. They're like, it's all right. Just let me make sure it's all right. So they passed this $1.9 trillion, despite the fact that Marjorie Taylor Greene tried to hold it up and then realized that, she has basically in the time you say her name, that's how quickly you can dismiss her. But that was the one headline that I saw before we started. But then
I enjoyed the soundbite of her requesting a recess, or what is it called, an adjourn, and the speaker says, "All in favor, ayes. All opposed," and you just hear this thunderous no.
Yeah, exactly. It was like on January 6th, before they stormed the Capitol, with the first the first senator who supported someone of the House objecting to the Electoral College certification. It was like, it was like the most. It was like, did you forget to give us homework for the weekend? It was like that. Like, oh, come on, yeah. So this is like. Can we just get this, like, we know how these things are going. Let's just get it out of the way. So obviously it's not the resounding victory, but when, look, you have a slim margin, you're able to pass things by slim margins. That's how it happens. And obviously it is, Republicans are taking a stance on, whoa, this is a lot of money. But let's be honest. It's not like the deficit was just run up by President Obama. There he was sandwiched between, 3 terms of Republican presidents that did the same thing, since we had the surplus with President Clinton. Ever since then, it's whatever it is, it's like $220 trillion. And it's like, look, it gets to a point where I'm like, I don't even know how you write a check for that. Like, I don't even know how, you pay off that debt. Just somebody come around the White House and it's like, Joe, the envelope's a little light this week. It's like, well, yeah, but it's I only have $1 trillion to put in here. I'm sorry. I'll give you $2 trillion next week. So I think that, look, it's they're clearly making a statement, and I guess they're like hoping for it to fail. And the reason why I brought up Marjorie Taylor Greene was the fact that she's just saying, like, why are we doing all this? Let's just open everything up. That should be our stimulus plan. And I guess that a lot of people, a lot of Republicans don't want to, be involved in this. They don't want to touch it. So what do you think, Scott? The fact that it got passed doesn't matter, even if it passed by 1 vote, which is what it did in the Senate. It passed by 1 vote, So what do you think, Scott?
I mean, that's exactly it. And the thing that I think Democrats and even the Biden administration are actually going to be crowing about this as being a Democratic achievement. Like, Republicans are going on the record saying they're not voting for this, which you have a majority of Republicans that actually support this bill. So it's kind of funny that Republicans are voting against it and then trying to act like it's a liberal pipe dream come to life. And, it's a little bit silly. And I don't know why Republicans think they have to be against this. I mean, I know it's because they don't want to give any credit to President Biden or Democrats by any stretch. But when you start to look at especially the moderate voters that you want to win back in 2022 and 2024 that left due to Trump, you're not doing yourself any favors by being so against this. And so the Biden administration is kind of changing their tack now. And Press Secretary Jen Psaki is going to come out and basically say, this is a Democratic achievement with no Republican voters, and they're going to embrace this. And say that's what it is. They were all about bipartisanship before, but now they're like, okay, if Republicans aren't going to come to the table on something that's popular, even with a majority of Republicans, then great, we'll take all the credit for it. And now Republicans can try to twist as much as they want, but they're going to be embracing it now, as we'll probably see, as a Democratic achievement and not anything about bipartisanship anymore. But it is surprising because you really do think that these Republicans politicians would want those voters to come back instead of possibly pushing them away forever as you get to 2022 and 24, and you keep having candidates that keep going more and more to the right or more in that Trump vein. You're going to continue to scare off those type of voters. So it's an interesting thing that they did, but you're right, 1 vote is all it takes.
Yeah, and look, the one thing that former President Trump said in the last 5 months that made sense was leading into the Georgia runoff, Senate runoff, was saying, like, you got to pass these $2,000 checks because people are about to vote for that. And it's like, if you pass the checks, you're probably going to keep the Senate. And who knows about that? But if they had, the fact is that they didn't. and then they didn't hold on to it. So it's sort of, it's like, if you ask people like, how do you feel about this $1.9 trillion stimulus package, you get one answer. If you ask people, how do you feel about getting a $1,400 check in the mail, more than twice of the last check that you got? I don't know. I feel like most Americans are going to say, oh no, I don't need it. I'm doing it. I'm doing okay. Why don't you just keep it for the government to fund some of those programs? And I think that, the polling on this package is, of course, favorable because of the fact that people are like, yeah, I'm going to get some money in there. And I of course am so wealthy, I'm not going to get a check, but the rest of you, no, actually, I'm pretty sure I am. But anyway, so what do you think, Tamara? I mean, it seems that it's that cut and dried. It's like, would you like some money? Are you interested? Is that something that would interest you, getting $1,400? I don't mean you personally. That's basically what the Biden administration is saying. Would you like some money?
Yeah, and I mean, and that's putting it in simplest terms, but I mean, this is groundbreaking legislation. It's a test on the child tax credits. I mean, the limited data that we have on giving families in below the poverty line a stipend for their children, in limited areas where that's happened before, the data shows that works and it's a positive benefit. And every time I've heard any Republican representative or senator talk about why they oppose this bill, it sounds like, the kid who didn't read the book try to give the book report. Like, it just, they'll say like, well, we need to focus on schools opening back up. And it's like, yeah, that's what this is doing. Yeah. And not enough, only 9% of it goes to vaccine research. Oh, suddenly you're interested in vaccine research? And like, it's going in circles. There's no clear they say people who don't need the money are getting the money. Well, one of the revisions that were made was that a smaller margin of people are receiving the stimulus checks, and they took out the $15 minimum wage, and like, certain provisions have been made. So I really don't understand, especially like we've already said, since polling is so in favor of this across the board, like, it just makes no sense why any of the Republicans voted against it, aside from just not wanting to support Biden. And I think even the moderate senators, even the the Murkowskis and Romneys, and I think they just took this opportunity to be like, well, we got to vote with our party on something, so we're going to go with this one.
It's funny you say that, because you did get that feeling, that it was just that. It's like, we're going to probably be against them on a bunch more stuff, in the next month. So this seems like a good one. We can say that hey, look, we don't just roll over and, rubber stamp everything that comes out of this White House. So, yeah, I mean, I don't know. Look,
things in the bill, like what's going to like tribal governments and minority farmers, like, there's so many little intricacies to this that we've never done before, that it's just a really I'm reluctant to say progressive bill in the truest term of the word. Sure. Meaning this is really going to move things forward. I don't mean progressive politically.
Oh, I thought you meant that it was government funded car insurance for everyone, thanks to Flo. So I'm glad you specified what that was. Yeah. No, I definitely appreciate that. And Scott, there was obviously the earlier version of this bill had the $15 an hour minimum wage, and I think that when that's what happens when you have this split Senate, is that one, basically Joe Manchin's like, I ain't doing that, and you're like, all right, so we have to kick it out because of this, and he's probably not the only one that had a problem with it, but it was just that's basically, it was that cut and dried, that it's like, well, if one person doesn't want it, we don't get it. Do you think that that's something that would be able to be passed with this makeup of Congress, or would it take a larger Democratic majority in the Senate, in a few years, for them to try and get any kind of, increase to the minimum wage, much less $15?
Yeah, no, it'll definitely take a bigger majority than what they have right now. And I know President Biden's still going to call on Congress to put something together. And look, by the time, even if they had a super majority of 60 in the House or in the Senate, this bill would still need to be worked on. So as far as the federal minimum wage, so it's probably best that it was kicked out and moved as a standalone type process, because as I've said too, I think there's a lot of moderate Democrats that might be like, okay, $15 an hour works in places like California and Washington State and New York and Massachusetts, but it might be a bit high for places like Tennessee and Georgia and Louisiana, where the cost of living is lower. So maybe there's something they could come together and say, okay, we definitely need to increase the federal minimum wage. I mean, that's just embarrassing. The $7.25 is way outdated. And in fact, you have some states that, for service workers, it's $2.13 an hour because they get tips. So there definitely needs to be an update to that, but maybe there's something where they can come together and come up with that it's pegged to the cost of living in an area, and that it moves up according to that. And so I think it'll take some time for them to do that, and being bogged down with that while the American people needed this overall stimulus package to be passed, it did make sense to split that off. And to Tamara's point, there are a lot of really great things in there. For instance, like she was mentioning, that child credit and everything is going to help lift potentially half of children out of poverty. And they did a similar type of system back in the 90s in the UK when Tony Blair, who was the progressive prime minister, they had enacted that over 20 years ago now. And so it is something we can look to in real time and see that this type of thing really does work. And it's something like 40% or maybe even more of childhood poverty has been eradicated over in the UK with the similar thing that they implied back in the late 90s. So there are more than just the $1,400, and also the extended unemployment aid through Labor Day, an extra $300, which again was brought down with Joe Manchin and the Republicans from the $400 that Democrats wanted. But still, you're going to have extended aid for unemployment all the way through Labor Day. That's going to really help a lot of folks get back on their feet. And the child credits are going to be great. And Mitt Romney was even supportive of that, and that has also been proven to work. So there's a lot of stuff in this bill that's really going to help the everyday American, and so it is exciting that they did pass this. And then if Republicans don't want to be part of that, that's on them with their losing strategy to try to hope to get their base out again in 22. I don't know how that's going to work for them, but it's a good thing that passed, and now they can focus on the federal minimum wage increase, which is definitely important too.
So this child tax credit is not designed for me to be able to send my kids to the nicer private school. That's not what the intention was. I thought that I've already crunched the numbers for what the savings are going to be. And, it's I think, my son's going to get a Bentley for his 16th birthday. So thanks for that. No, I mean, when you look at stuff like that, but it is nice to see that, any of us who have been able to take any degree of child deduction on our taxes is like, oh, wow, that really helps a lot, so it's nice to have something like this in place. And, Tamara, I think we've mentioned this on the show before, but the argument that comes up all the time is, oh, so you want to have this federal minimum wage? Why? So that somebody who works at McDonald's can make as much as teachers? And I was like, well, no, see, then you're bringing up the other point of the fact that we don't pay teachers nearly enough. It's like, no, you should raise that. But to Scott's point, yeah, $15 an hour, there's plenty. I mean, do you think that that's going to work in Alabama?
But also it brings up, I mean, if you're going to go down that road, it brings up it brings up the fundamental question of what is labor worth? Like, are you saying that, somebody who is on their feet for an 8-hour shift cleaning grease out of an oven trap is not working as hard as somebody in a white collar position behind a computer at a desk all day? I mean, I would think that the former should be paid more than the latter, So Sure. It's like, if you're going to have those discussions, it's like, what? If that is your argument that somebody in a fast food worker should not be paid as much as this wage, then that person needs to have the discussion of, in your mind, what is individual labor worth? Like, what is your definition of labor?
Right. Well, obviously we know that the value can be placed very high, whereas the real heroes in our society are joke writers. Those are the people who should be paid the most. Yeah, I mean, look,
My blood, sweat, and tears goes into the first 30 seconds of this podcast.
So I think that obviously this is a big win. I think if this weren't able to be passed, even with the narrow majority, that would have been a real problem. And also the fact that this is going to help out a lot of people. And I don't know why people who aren't in government get so upset about when the government spends money. It's like, they're going to spend this money on something. So, why don't they spend it on this?
Also part of the minimum wage discussion should really include, Bernie's provisions of any full-time employee that is on any sort of government assistance program, food stamps or welfare, that should come out of the corporation that they work for's pocket, not the American taxpayer. I mean, that should be part of the minimum wage discussion too, if somebody's arguing to keep it lower.
Yeah, no, I think that, I think that's a great point. And let's see, because I just saw this number. Yeah, so it seems like there's continuing to be widespread support for this bill, but we'll see. They say that we might start seeing some of these payments go out next week. The first one I got a direct deposit, and then I don't know if this happened to either of you or anybody who's watching or listening, but I guess people are only watching. I got like a gift card, basically, that I had to I got like an actual debit card that had this money loaded onto it, and I'm like, really? So that's I couldn't even be happy with my free money, and it was like, I had to bring it, they put both my wife and I, and it's like, we could go to the bank and but it was like, what am I going to do with this? It's like, that's just a dangerous thing to just give
Christian,
me.
Was it a Russian bank?
Right.
That's the weird thing.
It actually, United.
It said the First National of Borscht, parentheses, not a Russian bank. So, President Biden said that his name will not be on the checks here. And we previously had a president who delayed the distribution of the earlier checks because he wanted his name on it. Do you think that there's any chance, Tamra, that Biden actually just thought he was going to have to sign all the checks? So then he was like, no, forget it. I just don't want that.
No, he just didn't want Biden on it. They are going to say President Daddy.
Yeah, I do. Well, I do like that. And by the way, Michael B said some of my family and friends had that happen to them when it comes to the actual debit card. Oh, look at this! Our pal Storage Yard resident, I received the debit card. And Storage Yard.
That's so strange. I didn't know people were getting a debit card.
Storage Yard. Some people were getting the check, and then some people were getting direct deposit. Then it was going to the check.
Yeah. Well, the first one I got direct deposit. Yeah, I wanted direct deposit.
Both of mine were direct deposit, and I'm sure this one will be too.
And Storage Yard resident, I'm sure, used that money to, renew his InfoWars premium subscription. But we give you content for free, so you're welcome, everyone. Anyway, and look, we got Keith's dad saying hey, so I'm going to say hey right back. If I'm bringing messages up on the screen, I might as well bring up that one. Sort of a lighthearted title for this episode, referencing the fact that it was covered a lot, and I think that there were a lot of people who saw this not politically and thought, well, this is a good thing in terms of the Biden's dogs going back to Delaware after there was an incident with someone on the White House staff. Reportedly, he was confused by somebody he didn't recognize, and the dog didn't recognize the person either. Thank you. But I forgot to write that out earlier. But so I think that, look, it's like, yeah, I mean, it's probably crazy to be like, okay, now we live in a new house. Oh, and there's all these people around all the time. So to me, I hear that and I'm like, well, that's a good thing to do. It's not like they they got in the pickup, drove up to Wilmington, Delaware, and then they just left them tied up outside in the backyard. You know what I mean? I think it's, there's obviously people caring for these dogs, hopefully helping them get better acclimated so that they can come back to the White House. But I mentioned this story because it's the perfect example of where people are, it's like, you're just looking for anything. And look, people did this with Trump, but it's like, oh, look, he can't even take care of his dogs. I mean, basically, I don't know that anybody, I don't know that Hannity opened his show with that last night, but so, and I'm just like, oh, well, this is great. I mean, I think people liked the idea that there were going to be dogs in the White House again, and I think they'll be back, but it's less about the dog story. It's the reason I'm bringing it up, Tamra. It's more about the, oh, thank God something didn't go the way they planned. So now I've got at least 8 tweets ready to go. Right.
This is one of those too. I mean, I didn't hear too much about the dogs being moved. I heard that one of the dogs bit somebody. I didn't realize that they're having to leave the White House for a little bit, but good Lord. I mean, talk about non-news. I guess, the Oprah Meghan Markle interview wasn't all that happened this week.
I want to talk about that indirectly in a minute. Actually, I'm less interested in the interview itself, which I will admit that I did not watch, and it's not because I'm too good for it. It's just I don't know. It's not that I'm too good for it. I love gossip. I like to hear I like to hear clips of things for sure, but I'm like, I don't want to sit through it. I knew that I would hear the next day everything about it. But Scott, circling back to the dog story, and again, not so much about the dog story. It seems like, oh, we can make a big deal about this. Something that's not necessarily a big deal.
Well, of course. I mean, it just goes to whatever they can do to try to shed something negative on the Bidens or the Biden White House. Look, Trump wasn't even capable of having a pet. So,
Storage Yard resident just makes the point. President Trump does not like dogs.
I mean, look, it happens, and I'm hopeful that they can get him trained and bring him back to the White House, because it does add a nice extra boost of having a fun dog around the White House, and everyone loves a first pet. But again, it's not a surprise. I work on a show that deals with dogs and pets, and it happens. I mean, they are animals, and no matter how hard you train them, they are still animals at the end of the day, and they will react in certain ways that may not always be the most appropriate. So, but yeah, it's much ado about nothing, just because at this point we don't have someone like Trump that's going to be constantly out and stirring up controversy every single day or every single tweet. So now people are trying to find whatever they can to bring some drama into that. So that's what they do.
Yeah. And look, Keith's dad makes the point. You think the response Biden got is the same response Trump would have gotten? No, it's just just different. It's just the opposite. It's the other people. You know what I mean? It's just the people who would be making a big deal about it just switches on really anything. I mean, and I think that this certainly would have been a big deal. But I mean, honestly, I just feel like, Trump probably would have had the dogs put down, but they wouldn't have been there in the first place.
They wouldn't be there in the first place.
They wouldn't have been there in the first place.
There wouldn't be dogs in the first place because it's Trump. So
yeah, right. Exactly. So the reference to the Oprah interview, which boy, it just takes me back to when our friend Chelsea, we would do the show in studio with her, and just how much she wanted Oprah to be our president. And you know what? For Chelsea's sake, I hope one day she's right.
She's queen, so she's not even.
Yeah, that's right. She doesn't even need to be. It's like she's so much. Yeah, exactly. It'd be a step down for Oprah to become president. She'd be like,
right.
What? No, I'm Oprah. Are you kidding? But the the reaction to it, I thought, led to sort of an interesting conversation about freedom of speech and how we have it here. And they don't have it in the UK. I am not a huge fan of Piers Morgan, nor have I ever been. But he was essentially fired for saying the fact that he just didn't believe anything Meghan Markle said. And, I think we hear that and we're like, well, sure, there's like a whole network built on people who have opinions like that. There are multiple networks built on that. I referenced to some that require premium subscriptions that are built on that. But if you get enough complaints there, then it's like, oh, wow, we're in a lot of trouble. And I think it's something that we forget. And CNN's Jake Tapper, he tweeted about it, trying to just respond to this is what basically he's making the point. This is what happens when you have freedom of speech. And of course, many of our neighbors from across the pond used examples of like, yeah, but then you get the sort of trash journalism that you have, and, screen grabs of things from, during the Trump the Trump era, including, I think, a Lou Dobbs poll of how do you think, I should have grabbed it. It was like a Lou Dobbs screen grab of how do you think President Trump is handling COVID? Great, tremendous, or wonderful were like the three options that were given, so it's like, so I think it's interesting, and it's something that we forget, that, and I've upset some of our neighbors to the north when I point out that Canada does not have the same freedoms we do either, and so for better or for worse, Scott, I think it's something that we forget about, that there should be repercussions for when you give an opinion, especially if it's if it's an opinion like, I don't know, I lost the election. No, I didn't lose the election. It was stolen from me. And look out, on January 6th is going to be wild. So like there's times where when you have an opinion in free speech, it could be a little dangerous. I'm just picking just a hypothetical off the top of my head. But it's because this involves the royal family, it got it's definitely a very sort of a British thing that it highlights the fact that again, I don't need to ever defend Piers Morgan as an individual, but his right to be as obnoxious as he is just doesn't exist there, and it's something that I think we take for granted, Scott.
Well, yes and no. I mean, I would say him in the capacity of his job. I mean, it's still not the same thing here. You can't be on air. I mean, yes, you can be on air and make up lies and things like that, but there are certain lines you can't cross as a paid person on air as well. I mean, you see what happens with Megyn Kelly, for instance. You make a comment in the paid capacity as your in your job, and you can definitely still be let go. So in that case, that could have happened here as well if he'd done it. But yes, it was a little bit less because you're talking about the monarchy and everything else, which is its whole other level in itself. That's and if you did hear the Oprah interview, there were just certain times where they were calling it the institution and the system, and so you can it's a whole other entity. But yes, it's true. Our freedom of speech is very unique around the world with any other entity on the things that we're able to sort of get away with as opinions and be able to say that you could not say in other places. And you do forget about that as an American citizen. And of course there are limits, but when you're in a capacity for a business or you're representing somebody or you're in an employment situation, that also does not really exist in free speech in that sense either, though. You can't just say whatever you want. So
yeah. But I mean, and I think a lot of times when these slander and libel suits get filed by celebrities, they do it in the UK because they have laws that very much support the individual. But
right.
I don't know. I feel like you should be able to say, like, yeah, I saw this interview and I thought that what this person said was not truthful. And it can be an opinion, and it doesn't have to, be something that's like, how can you think that that someone would go on television and lie, especially a member of the royal family, And I don't know. I think that it seems like, oh, that was a very visceral response, and it's also sort of somebody who is being critical of the monarchy. I don't think he was saying the fact that like I don't believe her and God save the Queen. But what do you think about all this, Tamra?
Well, I think it's a matter of Meghan Markle was claiming libel to ITV, and they could get sued if Piers Morgan didn't retract or didn't not retract what he said, but apologize for saying it. And so when they approached him to apologize, and he refused to, so he stepped down. So it wasn't technically a firing either. He chose
that's true.
to step
You're
down
right.
because he didn't want to apologize, which I mean, I don't like Piers Morgan, but that's kind of shows somebody stands even people who I disagree with, nobody seems to stand behind their convictions anymore. So I kind of appreciate the fact that he's like, I'm not apologizing. So yeah, I'll go find another job.
Yeah.
So I don't think it's adjacent to a free speech issue in my mind, because yeah, he wasn't technically fired, and they were, asking him to apologize for what he said, not retract it. So I feel like we're turning everything into a free speech issue now. I think anybody on even the middle to the right, everything is now an issue of cancel culture and my free speech and my rights. And whether it's Dr. Seuss or Mr. Potato Head or Piers Morgan, it's just like, just because you disagree with something doesn't mean that it's like an assault on your rights and freedom of speech. I can understand the fear behind losing freedom of speech, but turning things that are not an issue of freedom of speech into an issue of freedom of speech, I think, is doing more damage to freedom of speech than the issue itself that they're concerned about.
Right.
Yeah. And
for sure. Yeah.
Right. Absolutely. And look, you referenced, and somebody in the chat mentioned it, you referenced the Dr. Seuss thing. And obviously that is, incredibly a non-story, in that the Seuss estate has really, what they did is they said, like, yeah, we're not going to print these books anymore. And I believe 3 of them were actually already out of print, so you're not really doing much, but if you have any of those books, you should notice that they are selling for $1,500 to $2,000.
I mean, they're not. I mean, not to dwell on the books too long, but it's sure. People keep saying, like, I lost my right to read the book, and it's like, Seinfeld is a TV show that's not on the air anymore. Does that mean you don't have the right to watch Seinfeld? I mean, it's like the same. It just makes absolutely no sense. People claiming they don't have the right to read those books anymore. Yeah,
no, and it's interesting because I thought that the New York Public Library took a good stance, and they're like, we're not going to take those books out of circulation. They feel like, well, you could probably learn something by seeing them. And I have one of those books, If I Ran the Zoo, and it is one of my son's favorite books. And there are some there's one page in particular where you're like, oh, that's too bad. But I don't know, you don't dwell on it. You're just like, it's like, well, you could ever have a conversation about that. But anyway, so I think that there was some interesting conversation in the chat. Keith's dad mentioned China's constitution gives its citizens the freedom of speech, but as Michael B points out, they don't like to enforce it. You might have a right to free speech, but if you exercise it, that right might be taken away from you. And then Keith's dad chimes in again. The difference between other countries and the U.S. with freedoms is that government gives the freedoms to its people in other countries. In the U.S., citizens tell the government what their freedoms are. I think that, and he also tags on rights are like muscles. If you don't flex them, you lose them. I think that it's that's a great point. I think it is very different in here, and I think that people who complain about people getting canceled for opinions, I mean, then they don't try to be. I can't remember his name. The guy in Russia that, as soon as he came back, he was immediately arrested because he didn't like Putin. And he's doing hard time for like a decade now just because, he spoke out against Putin. I mean, if you want to talk about like getting canceled, that's really, it's like, oh, no, I'm not on Twitter anymore. Or, oh, I lost my job writing. I lost my job writing for a late night talk show. It's like, okay, but, getting canceled is like, Jamal Khashoggi, that's really getting canceled. That's when somebody takes matters into their own hands. And I'm sorry, what were you saying, Tamra?
Yeah, somebody just making Twitter memes about you is not being canceled. I mean, and if it were, then Biden's dogs have been canceled. Why are we canceling Biden's dogs?
Yeah, well, that's true. Yeah. So in a very substantial conversation that is still happening is obviously new president does not solve any of our immigration problems and any problems with the border. It did not mean that all of a sudden there were going to be there were all of a sudden that there weren't going to be, children separated from their parents. And, it seems like there's efforts to improve some of these situations. But again, policies that were in place.
Not happening fast enough.
It's not happening fast enough. And I think that I don't quite know how you make these things happen faster. But what I find to be interesting is you have states taking matters into their own hands. Texas basically passing, legislation about, I forget exactly what it said, but they're basically saying like, we don't want to let all these people in here that the federal government says. And so, you need for there to be some kind of coordinated response. And I wanted to ask you first, Scott, do you think it, with this being passed, obviously that doesn't mean like, okay, now we don't need to deal with COVID anymore. But do you think that this is the next big issue that the White House and Democrats look at, or are there things that are more pressing?
I mean, it's kind of hard to say. On one hand, you'd say that would be the obvious, but on the other hand, you're like, yeah, there could be a lot of other things that Democrats may want to do, to move forward, because this is the only time they really have, which is crazy to say, is this year. Because once you get to the end of the year, and we're already almost through the first quarter, now everyone's gearing up for re-election and elections and the midterms, and then everything kind of grinds to a halt. So it's kind of ridiculous.
5 Republicans not running for re-election.
Yeah,
I did see that.
Roy Blunt, Missouri, who which I always thought he did such a great job during the Electoral College process, and then even during the inauguration day with President Biden. I was like, oh, this is great to see that bipartisanship. And obviously he had known Joe Biden for many years, but I had taken that as like, this is really great. And then to see that he's, not running again now makes a little bit more sense. Yeah, I mean, this is it. So the Democrats really have to think over the next few months, what is definitely going to be our priority that we think we have the best things to not only get passed, but also going to make the biggest difference to the American people. So that way we can be able to show some great stuff as we end this year, because once we get into next year, that's it. So it'll be interesting to see what will kind of rise to the top here as the priority after we've gotten past this first hurdle, to see what's going to be next for them.
So you're saying that before we know it, we're going to be looking at Dixville Notch, New Hampshire again. It's actually a lot closer than we think it is. I was thinking that was a ways off, but the run to that would be the case. What do you think, Tamra? Do you think that immigration, and look, there doesn't have to be a single thing that they attack, but do you think that is something that should be a primary focus, or do you feel that they're going to actually look at a lot of other issues at the same time?
Well, I think it needs to be a primary focus. I mean, they said all during the campaign that reuniting the children that had been separated from their families would be a priority. And in the current talks of what's going on at the border, we're kind of skirting around where we're at with that process, with reuniting the children. I mean, for me, that was something that I would harp on every time anybody would say, so without name calling, what do you not like about the Trump administration? And the first thing I would say was the policy to separate children from their parents. So this is something that I'm particularly, I think should be first and foremost priority. And like I just said, as they talk about, what's happening at the border, we're not really sure if we're making progress on making sure all of these children have been reunited with their parents. As far as, detaining children at the border, I know that they're trying to, I should say families, detaining families at the border. I know that they're trying to place them with like either relatives or someplace, a little bit more livable, but it's these kinds of things that aren't happening fast enough. I mean, this is a human rights issue, and everything that we can do to make this situation livable, treating people with dignity, that needs to be done, and it's just not happening fast enough.
And I would just add the 2 points too that I meant to mention earlier is again, the challenge for this is, as we've seen even with President Obama with a Democratic Congress, and then when it moved over to Republican Congress, is even though there is a wish to get this done, it does not take very many senators to peel away and not be able to get the momentum you want. Like, clearly, you know, Dreamers and some of the other things should be a focus, but the livable conditions are definitely a priority. And then again, what's going to be the future of the filibuster? There's been some talk of, but, you know, with this Voting Rights Act that is also incredibly important because of what's going on in 43 states right now. Is that something that's going to be moving to the front? And what is going to happen to the filibuster? Because also, you're not going to be able to get the comprehensive, I don't believe, the immigration reform you're going to want to do, that the Democrats are going to want with such a slim majority of the Senate, without doing some change to the filibuster. And so that's the next thing we're going to see. Is that going to be going away? Is that going to be fine-tuned? And there is an opportunity, even Senator Joe Manchin had mentioned, with the filibuster, of being able to fine-tune it to letting the opposition speak, but as soon as they're done and they're exhausted from being up there for 24 hours or however long they stay up there, that then it goes back to being a simple majority vote if they need to vote on certain things. So there is talk about, you know, somewhat keeping the filibuster in place, but being able to tweak it a little bit to what it was before. But you're not going to get comprehensive immigration reform or voting rights without that going away. And you're not going to, and it only takes one or two senators to peel away too. So that's the challenge that they're going to have. And they're going to have to see what is something that they can vote on now that they feel is going to be the best thing to move forward, and then bring that to the American people. So that's the challenges they have.
Yeah. Well, we'll keep our eyes on all of it and see what's coming. And by the way, this also just popped up. Congratulations to Merrick Garland, who was confirmed as Attorney General, 70-30, which is getting 20 Republicans to vote for you is like getting 1,000 Republicans to vote for you at this point. So congratulations to him. You know, you're not you don't have a job for life.
Those Republicans, those 20 Republicans, instead of voting yes or no, they voted sorry. That's the sorry from.
Maybe.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
If I'm not running again, then it's a yes. If I'm running again, then it's a no.
Yeah.
No,
I do want to wrap up, but there are just a couple of comments here that this never should have been an issue in the first place. Those poor kids not being able to see their families, biggest F up from the Trump administration. You can. I'm not disputing that fact, but that F up does precede the Trump administration too. I mean, this was a problem before that, and there are not quick fixes to it. And I'm not. You know, it's you can certainly say, oh, this made it worse. This exacerbated the situation, but it has been a problem for longer than 5 years. What were you going to say, Tamra?
Well, I disagree, because yes, it did happen in the Obama administration for very specific reasons, but it was the Trump administration that wrote it into policy that procedurally children should be separated from their parents.
And took it to another level. And it was sort of like we said with Mitch McConnell when the filibuster started to be chipped away with Harry Reid. But, you know, it was like he opened the door crack and Mitch McConnell blew the door open. And it's the same thing with this. So the Obama administration had done it for a specific reason. Again, I didn't agree with it. But then the Trump administration blew that door open and then made it official, and purposely did that on purpose to separate families, to avoid people trying to cross the border. So it was a very different thing.
And a very helpful comment, our friend Storage Yard resident said, send all those children to Tamra's house. So that, you know, that's the quick fix right there. Look, her house is big enough. Let's be honest.
That's right.
You know,
it would be barely a step up from the detention center that they're currently in. But sure, come on in.
But I do think the Wi-Fi is better at the detention center. I just want to let everybody know that. Keith's dad, the problem is crossing the border illegally is, well, illegal. What other crimes can you commit with your kids and not be separated? I'm sure I'm in the minority with this. I would say you're in the minority probably watching this show, but that is a well
pulled over for speeding. Should the penalty be your children get taken away from you?
Well, what if he was on my lap and I was letting him drive?
That's not what I asked. They were safely in the back seat.
Yeah.
And,
all right.
You know, the punishment does not fit the crime.
But I would say, Keith's dad, that is an opinion that I've certainly heard, and it is a complicated issue. And we do hope that there can be some focus on it, because obviously the kids suffering in any way, when it's like, you know, if your parents say, okay, well, we're going to go do this thing, you don't say like, well, you know, it's not right to enter the United States. I think that we should probably not do this. You know, it's not on the kids to do that. So I hope that wherever they end up, that at least the families can stay together. But you know, if they're not going to solve this in Washington, we're not going to solve this in the final 2 minutes of this show. But we appreciate everybody who kept the chat lively today. It's always great to see everyone. Some new faces and, of course, the familiar faces. Storage Yard resident, you would never miss this show, and that's what we love about you. I think Scott's walkabout will be coming to an end soon, so we'll be able to pick a steady day and time, and we'll do our best to stick to it. Next week might be one more week, though, where it's a little bit off. Like, we could try and do it next Wednesday, but then there's a chance that it might need to be next Thursday. But let's say it'll be one of those 2 days, and unless it's not. Week after that, I'm taking the family and I are going to be in Palm Springs for a week. We're renting a house because my son is on spring break. So I think come April, we'll pick a day and we'll do our best to stick to it. So thanks everybody who is hanging with us. And do you think that I would let the show end without bringing this comment? What a great screen grab this is going to be. Me smiling to Keith's dad saying you have a great show. Thank you, Keith's dad.
Yes, thank you.
And please make sure that that Keith checks out the show too. If you can watch it with your kids. In any case, we appreciate everybody and stay tuned. We'll have plenty more for you next week and the weeks ahead. Until then, though, Tamra, where can people find you?
Find me on TikTok at Hey Tamra.
And Scott, where are you on TikTok?
I'm too old and been barred permanently from TikTok. They don't let my age group on. You can find me on Twitter at sman80. That's sman80.
And you can find me on Twitter and Instagram at ChristianDMZ. And don't forget to follow the show. I actually remembered to tweet out the link this week at Biden Time on Twitter. I usually think of it after the fact, but you can still watch it after the fact, so that's fine. If you're enjoying the show and you're watching on YouTube, go ahead and subscribe to the Blackcast YouTube page, and you'll always be notified when this show has a new episode coming up. And you'll see other shows like our Marvel movie talk, which we went through all 9 episodes of WandaVision and gave our reactions to that. And now we will move on to The Falcon and the Winter Soldier in the weeks ahead. And of course, the Blackcast, where you'll find all sorts. Sometimes we'll have serious conversations like here. Other times it'll be interviews with musicians and authors and all sorts of fun things. So just subscribe over there. We appreciate it. And thank you to, and Scott just retweeted the tweet now at the end of the show. It just popped up. Yeah. He's like, hey, come check it out. Anyway, we appreciate everybody being on. We appreciate everybody joining us in the chat. We'll see you next week. Thanks, everybody.
Bye, guys.